I, like many of you, had an opportunity to stand here yesterday to begin to speak on the issues before us. The need for this urgent and critical voting rights legislation and our opportunity to act this week in the spirit of the holiday we celebrated on Monday, Martin Luther King Day. Before I get into my substantive remarks, I feel compelled to respond to a couple of items that Senator Hagerty just mentioned. And if he's willing to stay and listen, that'd be appreciated, but that's his choice. You know, a couple of our Republican colleagues have made mention to, well, we shouldn't focus on voting rights. There's other pressing issues at hand, things like the economy. Well, last I checked, because of our actions last year, especially the investments in the American Rescue Plan, wages are up and unemployment is at record lows. Democrats are taking action. We've been called out on what are we doing to address supply chain issues. We've acted. The Infrastructure and Jobs Act has been signed by the president. And I can attest that in the ports of Long Beach and Los Angeles, the percentage of containers waiting to be picked up is drastically down. Democrats are taking action. COVID. Yeah, we're still dealing with this once-in-a-century global health pandemic, but imagine how much better a position we would be in, how many lives we would have saved if the Trump administration took responsible action much earlier in this pandemic. And imagine how fewer cases and deaths we would have to count if more people would get vaccinated. Senator Hagerty, like many Republicans, says, well, when it comes to voting in elections, we should be focusing on making it easier to vote and harder to cheat. Who wouldn't agree with that? But here's the truth, here's reality. We know what it takes to make it easier to vote. That's what we're calling for in the Freedom to Vote Act. And I'll go through some of the specifics here in a minute, but the harder to cheat misses the point. The evidence is there. The data is out there. Massive voter fraud doesn't exist. Voter fraud is exceedingly rare in America. So we got the harder to cheat part down. If only Republican senators and legislatures and governors, for that matter, would embrace the proven reforms that make it easier for eligible Americans to cast their ballot in our democracy. But the most egregious, I just got to say, when Senator Hagerty suggests that changes to election law should only be done after careful debate and broad support, I invite him to say the same things to governors and legislators in Georgia, in Texas, in Arizona, and elsewhere, and I'll go through some examples in the course of my presentation. But colleagues, as I've had an opportunity to share with many of you, you know that before I joined the Senate last year, I served for 6 years as California's chief elections officer. I served as California's Secretary of State, the largest state in the nation with the largest and most diverse electorate in the nation. And in that role, I had a chance to oversee a side of election administration that most Americans and most United States senators never really experience. Former state secretaries of state serving in this body, Senator Blunt, Senator Brown, Senator Manchin, myself the most recent. And my experience, by the way, included overseeing the administration of the November 2020 presidential election in the most populous state in the nation. So I want to take a few minutes to explain exactly how the Freedom to Vote Act will help all voters and respond to some more of the claims I've heard about this bill from our Republican colleagues. See, the purpose of the Freedom to Vote Act is to give every eligible American more choices about how and when they cast their ballot. No matter where you live, no matter which state, no matter which zip code, no matter your political party preference, you deserve multiple, safe, secure, accessible options for registering to vote and for casting your ballot. Isn't that what we all supposedly learned in high school government class? That our democracy works best when as many people participate. The will of the people, not the will of the few, not the will of the privileged few, the will of the people. But today, voters in different states face different paths to the ballot box, some more difficult than others, needlessly. And sometimes what some may view as a small obstacle can add up to big deterrents to participation depending on where you live, depending on where you work, depending on your disability, and more. And so that's why the Freedom to Vote Act is so critical. It will help all Americans by guaranteeing the same baseline of access to the ballot to all eligible Americans. And no, this is by no means a federal takeover of elections. Appreciate that several of my colleagues have gone through the history of Congress acting to protect the right to vote and to improve elections. But let me really bottom line it to make this point. With the passage of the Freedom to Vote Act, it is not Congress that will be distributing ballots or the federal government that will be collecting ballots and counting ballots. Election administration will still be local. What we're doing is setting a baseline for access to the ballot for all eligible Americans. And yes, it is appropriate for us to do so. As Senator Klobuchar, Senator Peters, and others have referenced the Constitution, referenced prior congressional action, and I will point out too, it's already been pointed out that in the Constitution of the United States, the times, places, and manner of holding elections for senators and representatives shall be prescribed in each state by the legislature thereof, but the Congress may at any time, by law, make or alter such regulations. That's what we're seeking to do. But I really want to up the ante, folks, and I need you to listen to me because there's two important words. Senator Peters gave through the list, right? The Voting Rights Act, the Help America Vote Act, the National Voter Registration Act, 1993, passed on a bipartisan basis. In it, you will read that it is the duty of the federal, state, and local governments to promote the exercise of the fundamental right to vote. I call your attention to two words: the duty of government, not the option, not the if you wanna, not the may, the duty of government to what? To promote the exercise of the fundamental right to vote, not just to sit back and make sure that elections are run fair and square, not just to, hey, it's up to you voters if you want to register. But government has a duty to promote the exercise of the fundamental right to vote. So now the specifics of the Freedom to Vote Act and how it tries to live up to that duty of government to promote. Well, as we all know, you can't vote unless you're registered to vote, and different states have different options for how to register to vote. Once upon a time, you had to present yourself in person at a county courthouse, right? And then imagine the innovation that it took, the getting out of the comfort zone once upon a time for folks around the country, and we had the audacity to suggest, wait a minute, you can register to vote by mail, or signing a voter registration card under penalty of perjury that your information is true and correct, attesting to your eligibility. Now, some states have only the option of voting, through that card or in person. Other states have innovated and accepted things like online voter registration. Imagine that. Or automatic registration, same-day registration. Again, I want to talk to you in a minute about that, but let me big picture why it's important. Numbers are out there, data's out there. Who is it that tends to be eligible to vote in America but not registered to vote? Disproportionately communities of color, disproportionately lower income communities, disproportionately young people, eligible voters. But voters of color, potential voters of color, young people, and low income are disproportionately not registered. So we can either act, as the NVRA said, we had a duty to promote, to increase those registration numbers, or not, to live up to the duty we need to. And if you don't, or heaven forbid, make it harder to register to vote or to stay registered to vote, who are you disproportionately affecting? So while Republicans can deny their intent, we know the true effect of making it harder to register to vote or to stay registered to vote. So again, different states have different options. In Alaska, you can register in person, by mail, online, automatic voter registration. In California, yes, I'm proud, in person, by mail, automatic registration, online, election day, same day of registration. Texas, Mississippi, only in person or by mail. Different states, different rules. Everybody deserves the same opportunity. So why the value of online voter registration? Well, first of all, it's convenient, right? There's a whole lot that people have become accustomed to doing online. Second, for the good government types and the folks who want to make prudent use of our precious taxpayer dollars, it lowers administrative costs. When you allow voters to register online, it's seamless, it's quick, and it's easy. And I've been to county elections offices where you have clerical staff sitting there with a stack of voter registration cards that they have to read and input by hand. Not very efficient. Online voter registration increases efficiency, and by the way, accuracy. I know I don't have the best penmanship. Can you imagine the clerical staff in county offices trying to make out, well, how do you spell this name that can be spelled 3, 4, 5 different ways? Online registration reduces those types of errors and cleans up the voting rolls. And it is very cost efficient to implement and has been proven in state after state to be safe, secure, and effective. But should online registration be the only option? No, and we shouldn't take away the in-person or paper registration. Some states have innovated in the automatic voter registration space, right, where we take advantage of the opportunity when citizens are interfacing with their government, particularly the DMV. 90% of eligible voters in America will either have a driver's license or a state ID. And what are we asked to provide when we conduct that transaction? Mr. President, we're asked to provide our name, our address, our date of birth, a signature attesting to the accuracy of our information, all the same information that we're asked for when we're registering to vote. So it's just common sense to utilize that same transaction for eligible citizens to seamlessly be registered to vote at the same time. Going back to the National Voter Registration Act, which required a voter registration opportunity for people when they go to their Department of Motor Vehicles, that was sort of an opt-in model. Thanks to technology today, we can implement this opt-out model. You still have an option as a voter to not be registered to vote if you choose not to. But the default is if you're eligible, you're added to the voter rolls. And similar to online registration, it's been proven safe, it's been proven secure, it's been proven effective. From an elections perspective, it's wonderful. It doesn't just capture previously eligible but unregistered voters, now adding them to the voter rolls. If you're already registered to vote, when you renew your license or your ID, guess what? You're asked, is this your current address? Now, when most people move, they're quick to do the change of address through the post office because they don't want to miss out on their mail. You're updating your driver's license to your ID because it has to reflect your current address. But a lot of people don't think of, oh, let me call the county and update my voter registration. This is a seamless and effective way of doing that. In California, our experience, similar to other states, for every new registered voter that was enrolled through automatic registration, you had at least 2 voters that updated or confirmed the accuracy of their registration. So collectively, it leads to the most accurate voter rolls we've had in a long, long time. Isn't that worth doing? Isn't that in the interest of election integrity? And it's not a partisan idea. States, not just California, states like Alaska represented by Republicans, have automatic voter registration. The state of Maine, who has sent to this body a Republican and an independent, has automatic voter registration. And here's a true lover of democracy perspective on automatic registration. Reverend Warnock, I hope you can appreciate this. Colleagues, think about it. If you are eligible to vote in America today, but not registered, you do not receive the state's voter information guide if your state provides one, because you're not on the list. If you're eligible to vote in America today but not registered, your county doesn't send you your sample ballot to know when Election Day is, where to go, and what we're voting on. If you're eligible to vote in America today but not registered, chances are candidates and campaigns aren't knocking on your door or calling you during dinner or flooding your mailbox, trying to engage you in the democratic process. Maybe the smart campaigns and candidates are trying to reach out to more voters, but by and large, that doesn't happen. So the sheer addition of adding eligible Americans to the voter rolls creates that activity. Imagine that, civic engagement. Imagine that, participation in our democracy. But why stop there? Same-day registration options. What if you missed a prior artificial deadline of registering to vote or updating your registration, and come Election Day, you are still 18 years or older and a citizen of the United States? You deserve the opportunity to have your voice heard in that election. And election administrators know how to do this. You can register to vote, and whether your registration is automatically processed for jurisdictions that have the technology and the history to do so, or your registration is held and your ballot is held, you can still cast your ballot, have the county process your registration, and your voice is heard in that election. That's what democracy is supposed to be about. And again, not partisan. 20 states, including Republican-leaning states, have already implemented same-day registration, including Wyoming, Idaho, and Utah. California implemented, we technically call it conditional voter registration, but starting in 2017. In 2020, just to give you a flavor for what it means, in 2020, nearly 270,000 California voters were same-day registrants. 270,000. That's like half a House district. Of all in-person California voters in 2020, nearly 10% were same-day registrants. The others, why such a big number? Because so many people voted by mail, voted early, et cetera. And it's not partisan. Of the same-day registrants, when the registrations were processed, 36.2% were not affiliated with any political party. 32% Democrats, 25% Republicans. So it's not partisan. It's good for everybody. And as we know, registration's only half the battle. Just because somebody may be registered doesn't guarantee that they're going to cast their ballot. Going back to the NVRA, folks, government has a duty to promote the exercise of our fundamental right to vote. So we have a duty to implement, and these are proven reforms, on the registration side. What about the casting your ballot side? Again, once upon a time, you had to show up in person on Election Day only between this hour and that hour at one designated location. In this modern economy with so many different types of work schedules, that's not exactly easy. I live in Los Angeles where we have this thing that we call traffic. So if you have a job that's no longer 9 to 5, and imagine dropping kids off at school before you leave for work, have a full day, you're dealing with traffic, getting back, got to get kids from school, got to get dinner on the table. Now I got to go to one designated location and be in line by a certain hour to vote. There's got to be a better way. And there is, depending on the state where you live, you have options that include voting on Election Day in person, voting in person but early, prior to Election Day, or voting by mail. Again, all proven, secure, effective ways to cast your ballot. But we have a mishmash across the country. California, and Alaska, by the way, have Election Day, vote by mail, early voting. Texas, Election Day only, or early voting, but very limited vote by mail. Mississippi, sorry, Election Day only. Connecticut, sorry, Election Day only. Yes, even Democratic states have room for improvement. So in making the process easier, you shouldn't be hampered because of the demands on your time, family obligations, work obligations. That's why states like Utah were early proponents of voting by mail, why states like Arizona were early proponents of early voting. And so we should strive to provide all voters in America the same baseline of access to the ballot. Duty to promote. The For the People, the Freedom to Vote Act, that's exactly what we're trying to do. And at this point, let me just reply to something that our colleague Senator Cornyn referenced. I wish I could borrow his board that he had right next to him. Do you guys see that big 94% that he had on a board? He was citing a Pew Research Center report that said 94% of voters in the November 2020 election found it easy to vote. That's great. I'll tell you why. Because in 2020, because of the threat of the pandemic, even states that were resistant prior to affording voters more early voting options knew that it was smart to do so to reduce crowds and long lines on election day. That's why states, even who were reluctant prior to 2020 to expand their vote by mail opportunities, knew that it was smart to do so that people can vote safely and securely from home. And it worked. It was the most secure election in our history with record turnout. So if that's the case, why go backwards? Why go backwards? Because that's what they're doing in the states that have introduced and passed, 33, 34 and counting, laws that are making it harder to register to vote, harder to cast their ballot, contrary to the NVRA, duty to promote. So what are the options for voting? Early voting, as we mentioned. And we want to be specific. See, most states already have some sort of in-person early voting opportunity, but it's inconsistent. Some offer weekends, some don't. Some offer evening opportunities to vote, some don't, or before work hours, after work hours. Every voter, regardless of the demands on your time, deserve equal opportunities to vote prior to Election Day in person if that is your choice. Mail voting. Again, a lot of states have some sort of mail voting, but we're specific to no excuse voting by mail. Voting by mail is secure, proven to be secure. So why have only a limited subset of the electorate able to benefit from that? We saw it work beautifully in November 2020. Imagine how much better it can work once we're past the pandemic. Mail voting was pioneered actually in a lot of Western states, not blue or red. North Dakota, South Dakota, Wyoming, Idaho, Nebraska came along with Utah doing all mail elections in addition to Oregon, Washington, Colorado, and California. Let me tell you the other beauty of vote by mail, especially when we cover postage. I don't have a roll of stamps in my kitchen drawer anymore. Very little done is done that way. But when you're voting by mail and we can cover that postage, literally no excuse. You get your ballot in the mail, give it back to the postal, your letter carrier, and it gets back to the county, and it's counted. Some people may wonder, though, and we've had this battle across the country and in these chambers over the course of the last year about what's happening at the Postal Service these days. Is mail quick? Is it slow? What about the pandemic? What about change in processes and procedures under the postmaster? Well, in California, Colorado has it as well, other jurisdictions across the country, we have a tool that allows voters to track their ballot through the mail. Imagine, it's going to blow your mind. Imagine signing up to receive either phone calls, emails, or text messages on the status of your ballot through the mail service. Wow. Mr. Padilla, the county just mailed you your ballot. Be on the lookout, right? It's going to come in the next few days. When I return it, confirmation that the Postal Service has taken possession of it, confirmation from the county when they've received my ballot, confirmation when my ballot has been counted. It's a great tool for administrators because you can identify bottlenecks in delivery service. And you can go to a local branch and say, hey, folks, sorry, the Macy's catalog can wait another day. We've got to get these ballots out on time because election day deadlines are looming. But for a voter, to have that peace of mind that my ballot arrived, my vote was counted, my voice was heard. Great for transparency, great for public confidence in the electoral process. That's what vote by mail provides. So similar to voter registration, multiple, safe, secure options, same as it should be with voting. Multiple, safe, and secure, proven options, all to help us live up to the obligation, the duty to promote the exercise of our fundamental right to vote. That is the opportunity that we have before us today, colleagues, either by proving the measure that has been sent over to us from the House that encompasses both the Freedom to Vote Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. And if we can't do it during consistent with our current rules, then let's amend the Senate rules to allow us to do that, to protect the right to vote for all Americans, because our right to vote is under attack. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.